At 1000 hours local time, the U.S. military was tracking cartel smugglers who had just made a fatal miscalculation in the eastern Pacific. Their go-fast boat cut through the water at 50 knots. This was a speed that immediately marked them as suspects, as legitimate fishing vessels manage maybe 12 knots on their best day. Unknown to them, this trip would be their last one ever. Inside the vessel, the 5-man crew radiated confidence. This was their 18th successful run along this exact route. Same boat, same protection money paid to the right officials, same $42 million street value cargo hidden beneath blue tarps. Split 5 ways after the cartel's cut, each man stood to clear $2 million, enough to disappear forever. The helmsman checked his GPS religiously. On schedule, on course. 4 Mercury outboards pushed at maximum throttle, racing across seemingly empty ocean 140 miles from the coast. No other vessels visible in any direction, just blue water and what they believed was freedom. In their minds, it was a straight home run. They had no idea they'd been spotted 2 hours ago. 25,000 feet above, an HC-130J Super Hercules had been circling since 0600. Its AN/APS-154 advanced surveillance radar swept a 200-mile radius of ocean, tracking hundreds of contacts simultaneously. The radar operator had flagged this particular vessel at 0800 hours. 3 red flags had triggered the alert: speed inconsistent with vessel profile, course deviation from standard shipping lanes, and no AIS transponder signal. In the interdiction business, 3 strikes meant game over. The Hercules sensor operator switched to the Star Sapphire 380 HDC electro-optical system, zooming in from 140 miles away. Through the stabilized camera, he could count the outboards, observe the tarps covering the cargo area, and even track individual crew members moving on deck. At 0945, he noticed something critical. The Go-Fast had stopped its evasive zigzagging and was now running straight north. Either overconfidence or fuel concerns were driving the change in tactics. The tactical coordinator lifted his encrypted satellite phone. "Kimball, this is Eyes 1. Target maintaining steady course, speed 50. Recommend launch interdiction assets." The intelligence cascaded through Link 16 to the USS Kimball's Combat Information Center, then to Joint Interagency Task Force South in Key West, and finally to DEA liaisons monitoring cartel movement patterns. The Kimball was 200 nautical miles away, too far to intercept at her maximum speed of 28 knots. But she didn't need to close the distance herself. The mathematics were straightforward. The Go-Fast would burn through its fuel reserves in 4 hours at current speed. A helicopter could launch, intercept, and resolve the situation while the cutter continued closing for the aftermath. However, back to these smugglers. They had made one critical error. They were operating well within range of something with a very specific solution for runners who won't stop. From a moving helicopter, hitting a moving engine block should be theoretically impossible. However, the Coast Guard's Hydron unit had accomplished exactly that feat 500 times before, and today might be number 501. An hour after the U.S. military began tracking the smugglers, the MH-65E lifted off the Kimball's flight deck. Unlike the standard search and rescue configuration most people associate with Coast Guard Dolphins, this aircraft had been extensively modified for a very specific mission. The pilot banked hard toward the intercept point, climbing to 3,000 feet where fuel efficiency peaked. 20 minutes into the flight, the co-pilot spotted their target, a white rooster tail stretching half a mile behind the fleeing vessel. 4 outboards running at full throttle create a massive water disturbance. From 3 miles out, it looked like someone had drawn a chalk line across the ocean. The smugglers continued their counter-surveillance zigzags, completely unaware they'd been tracked continuously for over 3 hours. The zigzag pattern represented textbook cartel doctrine. Change heading every 3 to 5 minutes. Never maintain a straight line long enough for intercept calculations. Against surface vessels, this strategy worked effectively, as patrol boats attempting interception would constantly recalculate courses, burning extra fuel with each correction. But helicopters operate in 3 dimensions. While the smugglers zagged left and right, the MH-65E simply flew straight lines between intercept points, cutting corners the boat couldn't navigate. Inside the Go-Fast, the smugglers were probably running their own calculations. 4 Mercury 300s burned 25 gallons per hour each at wide open throttle. Their tank held maybe 400 gallons. After 2 hours of running, they'd consumed 200 gallons, leaving perhaps 2 hours of fuel, maybe even less with the added weight of cargo. At current speed, the mothership rendezvous is still some 3 hours. This means that someone had miscalculated, or they'd burned more fuel than expected during the initial sprint. Either way, physics was becoming their enemy. The helicopter, meanwhile, had 4 hours of endurance and could refuel on the Kimball if necessary. At this point, it wasn't a chase anymore. It was a foregone conclusion playing out in slow motion. A few minutes later, the helicopter dropped to 500 feet and approached from the go-fast stern, maintaining a 500-meter standoff distance. This angle kept them outside effective small arms range while providing optimal positioning for what might come next. The pilot matched the go-fast speed and initiated the compliance phase that Coast Guard procedures demanded. The co-pilot activated the long-range acoustic device, LRAD, capable of projecting intelligible commands at 162 decibels, which is louder than a rocket launch at close range. Broadcasting in both English and Spanish, "Stop your vessel, prepare for boarding. This is the United States Coast Guard." The helicopter's rotor downwash created a localized hurricane around the go-fast. Spray and chaos erupted everywhere, but the smugglers didn't even slow down. The calculation was simple for the criminals below. 5 men, 2,800 pounds of contraband worth $42 million street value, and potential 20-year sentences each. Surrender meant certain conviction. Running meant possibly, potentially getting away if they could reach shallow water or friendly territory. While they'd gladly take those odds, what they didn't know was that the helicopter above had dealt with runners many times before. What happened next was 15 minutes of warnings, visual signals, and siren wails, all that produced zero compliance. The pilot radioed the Kimball for authorization to proceed with warning shots. Approval came immediately. The rules of engagement were crystal clear for vessels refusing to stop in international waters. The gunner prepared the M240B machine gun, capable of delivering 650 rounds per minute. The first burst sent a message written in tracers and waterspouts, with rounds impacting just meters in front of the go-fast's bow. The distinctive hammering sound of the M240B echoed across the water. Most smugglers stop at this point. These ones didn't. After 3 bursts of warning fire, it became clear these smugglers had chosen the hard way. The aerial gunner switched from the M240B to something far more surgical. A Barrett M107 semi-automatic rifle chambered in .50 caliber BMG. This wasn't just changing weapons, this was switching from negotiation to surgical termination of propulsion systems. The gunner belonged to the Helicopter Interdiction Tactical Squadron, Hytron. Based in Jacksonville, the only airborne law enforcement unit in the world authorized for what they term airborne use of force. Since 1998, Hytron has conducted over 500 vessel interdictions, removing $16.7 billion worth of contraband from cartel logistics chains. Hytron crews represent the apex predators of maritime interdiction. Selection begins with the top 1% of Coast Guard marksmen, then gets significantly harder. Candidates spend months at training facilities, shooting from moving platforms in Sea State 4 conditions, 6-foot swells with 20-knot winds. They master brutal physics. Helicopters moving at 50 knots on 3 axes, pitch, roll, yaw. Targets moving at 50 knots on different vectors. Ocean swells adding vertical movement to both platforms. Wind deflecting bullets, engine vibration disrupting aim, and salt spray coating optics. Most military snipers work from stable platforms against stationary targets. Hytron gunners do neither. Each gunner carries a Barrett M107 that weighs 30 pounds. Each round weighs 42 grams and leaves the barrel at 853 meters per second, carrying over 11,000 foot-pounds of energy. This is enough kinetic force to punch through an inch of steel at 500 meters. Outboard engine blocks made primarily of aluminum offer virtually no resistance. The first .50 caliber round found the starboard outer engine's powerhead. The 300 horsepower Mercury didn't just stop, it disintegrated. Aluminum fragments and oil erupted in a black cloud as internal components became external. The speed dropped from 50 to 38 knots instantly. The second shot targeted the port outer engine, the round severing fuel lines and destroying the water pump. The engine seized within seconds. The speed fell to 25 knots. The third shot was a picture-perfect demonstration of military precision. The round entered the starboard inner engine's lower unit and exited through the powerhead, taking most internal components along. The speed fell to 12 knots. The fourth and final shot ended all pretense of escape. The last Mercury exploded in a shower of metal and oil, the .50 caliber round converting kinetic energy into mechanical destruction. The engine went dead. Dead in the water. No engines, no options, nowhere to run. The helicopter maintained overwatch while the Kimball launched two 7-meter RHIBs, rigid hull inflatable boats. Each carried 6 operators from Tactical Law Enforcement Team South. These were maritime special operations personnel trained specifically for opposed boardings in non-permissive environments. The RHIBs approached in a textbook pincer maneuver, their 470 horsepower diesels pushing them at 45 knots across the swells. Each boat carried operators wearing level 4 body armor with integrated flotation, M4A1 carbines with EO-Tech holographic sights, and comprehensive less lethal options. As they closed within 10 meters, the lead operators stood in the bow, Beretta M9 pistol trained on the smugglers. Commands erupted in rapid-fire Spanish, the universal language of maritime interdiction. Hands up, nobody move, get on your knees. The 5 smugglers, standing frozen among their cargo tarps, found themselves facing 12 weapons from 12 operators who had done this many times before. With the smugglers secured and their cargo documented, one problem remained: the stateless vessel now floating under international maritime law. The disposal team spread accelerant across the deck and hull, then ignited it with a single flare. The Go-Fast transformed into the world's most expensive bonfire, burning for hours before slipping beneath the waves. Only then did the team transport their guests and evidence to the nearest U.S. port for processing. Another successful interdiction, another $42 million removed from cartel operations. Another reminder that in the vast expanse of the Eastern Pacific, there's always someone watching, always someone ready to respond when smugglers make that fatal decision to run. If you enjoyed this video and would love to do a deep dive into videos like this, check our video, How One Ukrainian Drone Sank Russia's Most Advanced Warship. Link in the description below.